Okay, well everyone, this is Meg from the iMoot team. Welcome. I hope it's a more reasonable hour wherever you are than where I currently am in Sydney. Tim's joining us from Open University over in the UK, and I'm assured that he's one of the main brains behind Moodle's quiz function. So I'm sure he's got plenty to share with us today. So take it away, Tim.
Hi, well, I'm actually coming to you from my apartment in Milton Keynes, in the middle of England. It's actually about as far as you can get from the ocean in England, but that's only about 200 kilometers. So I actually don't want to tell you stuff during this next 40 minutes or an hour. I'm kind of hoping that you will tell me stuff. Where I'd like to get to is kind of a discussion of what you can't yet do in the Moodle quiz, and hence what we should be thinking about building next to make it even better. When you can already do a lot in the Moodle quiz. So, but in order to get us to that conversation about what's missing, I thought I wanted to set the scene by asking some questions, sort of just to frame the discussion. So if we now, we've been practicing the, just writing on the slides on the practice your graffiti here on slide 2 of the Google document. If we could all now move to slide number 3, we'll get started for real. And of course, anything we do with educational technology really should be driven by what we're trying to do as educators. You can tell I'm not really an educator because I'm kind of supposed to start with the easy questions. This is probably quite a hard question, but I encourage you to write some ideas on the slide. Yeah, I think getting students to learn stuff is a very good summary. Of course, the question is how. Encourage students to find their way and build their knowledge. Yep, I mean that's a more refined way of saying learn stuff, I suppose. What people learn is a short way of putting it. So
I couldn't. I was talking when you had that music on.
help them become lifelong learners. I like that one. Well, you see, I mean, there's one suggestion there that, the thing about score progress bar and top right corner. You see, I don't think that's a goal for education. I think that's, a technology you might use, but it's not actually a goal. So I think that answer doesn't quite answer the question I'm trying to ask. Making people want to learn, that's good. So I don't know how long to give people. Got about 12 slides to get through in an hour, so we can have 3 or 4 or 5 minutes on each one. I mean, my answer to this question is along the lines of getting students to learn stuff. I mean, the scary thing about being an educator is basically you've got to change something in your learners' brains, and you're not a brain surgeon. You can't actually do that. You can't get inside a student's head and change stuff. Only they can do that. So what I'm getting is we have to give students the tools to learn themselves. And, hopefully there's a role for the quiz there. And teachers are very important to this process, but yeah, you've got to, ultimately only, you can lead a student to knowledge, but only they can think about it. So, and the question, of course, we need to get towards is can the quiz be a tool for achieving this goal? So that's what we're trying to do. I now want to move on to the next slide, slide number 4. And so with Moodle, this is educational technology. This is using computers to try and help us achieve our goal of getting students to learn. So we need to think about what can computers do that might help? And what might computers let us do that we couldn't do without computers? If you could start writing your ideas on slide number 4, please. So track data and put it into usable reports. That's a good answer. Analyze the data automatically. Yep. Add efficiency. That's quite a broad answer. Would you like to add some specific ideas about how computers can add efficiency? If you like, you can write more than one thing on a slide. You want as many ideas as possible, please. Right, I'm now getting confused because lots of stuff's being written at once, which is great. So being the link between the inspiration for learning and the actual gained knowledge. I'm not sure I understand quite what you mean by that. It sounds good. I think I need to get at something good, but I can't understand. Provide a different space with different functionality to face-to-face. That's true. I had some answers to this. One of the things I thought computers, and particularly the internet, let us do is they let us publish information with almost zero cost. I mean, in the past, if you wanted to, make some information available to a lot of people, you had to print a book, and that cost money. These days, you can just, I don't know, create a Google document and share it with people. So I think that's something sort of fundamentally new that computers and the internet let us do. Another one I had was, create stuff for a wide audience. That's another way of saying that. Just more broadly, I mean, computers let us communicate with each other, which previously we could do face-to-face, but as this iMoot shows, we can now communicate all around the world, which is magical, really. And yes, students can easily create stuff and disseminate. In the past, when you had to print a book to share information, that was expensive and students couldn't really do it. They could make a poster to stick on the wall in your classroom, but only then that class could see it. Yes, 24/7 environment, always there. That's important. We can let students study when it suits them, not just during the class time. We've had answers about data. I think there's another set of things we haven't got to yet, which is that computers can calculate things. And that's useful for us to think about in two ways. How do I? So one way computers can calculate that's useful to us is that if the student input something, we can compute a response, we can compute a grade, or we can compute some feedback automatically, which is, of course, what the quiz is all about, harnessing that particular property of computers. And another thing that I would relate to this computation area is computers can randomly generate different questions to ask different students. I mean, that obviously works best in numerate disciplines because it's easy to randomize numbers. But if you're familiar with the Moodle quiz, then you know you can actually randomly select any sort of questions. Right, and that's another good answer. Computers can adapt to the user, and that's another example of using the sort of calculating ability of the computer to process the student's input. Takes us back to the data handling side, and then do something. So I would group these answers into the three parts. There's kind of handling, storing, managing lots of data. There's letting people to connect to each other over networks, and then there's doing computing to generate, I suppose, new information from old information, generating new quiz questions at random. So those are the points I wanted to get across. There are some other good ideas there. And I think we can start to see maybe how some of these things that computers can do would lead us to build an online quiz tool like Moodle has. So let's move on to the next slide, slide number 5. So we thought about what computers can let us do, but now I want to think in an even more abstract way. I want you to type a single word that sort of describes computers to you. Liberating is an interesting one. Cool, definitely. Accurate is a good one. Computers will do exactly what you tell them and nothing else. Complicated, yeah. Infuriating, I've definitely been there. Oh, making it easy is cheating. I wanted single words. Can you? Okay, though. I think that's true. I mean, sometimes they're complicated, sometimes they do make things easy. Automation, yeah. Efficient, yes. Transparent, that's another interesting word. Yeah, good one. Of course, sometimes they're transparent, sometimes they're completely mysterious. Some things computers do can be almost impossible to work out why it's done that. Be thinking there of some of the Moodle bugs I had to fix. It's like, what? That's happening? But on other times, they can be really present information clearly. Literal, yes, that's sort of like accurate, but a bit different. Specific, great when they work. Actually, really interesting to see the range of different words people are coming up with. Actually, interestingly, no one's used. I had three. I thought of 3 words that I wanted to use, and so far no one's come up with any of the overlap with any of the words I wanted to use. Those are the three properties I've just typed that I thought of. I think computers are patient. They will happily go on doing the same thing again and again. And when a student wants to practice, for example, I know something like simple mathematics or spelling, having a computer that won't get bored and is quite a useful property for computers to have. I think computers are stupid. Some people try very hard to make artificial intelligence in computers, and that's a really noble effort. It's a really interesting research problem, but it's really hard because fundamentally computers are stupid. They'll do exactly what you tell them and nothing else. For people arriving late, we're on to about slide number 5 of the Google Docs presentation, and the third property I had, which was sort of related to patient, but they're unsleeping. If a computer wants to do their Moodle quiz at 3 o'clock in the morning, then they can, and the computer will be there, and it can give you instant feedback. So those are my 3 words, but I love some of the other words other people have come up with. I would never have thought of some of those in a million years, but they're really good. Okay, let's now move on to the next slide, where we start to think more specifically about, I now feel I've set the scene. What we want to do, we want to help students learn something, and we can't do it for them, they have to do it. Computers have these properties we've just discussed. So now let's jump ahead and suppose that we've decided now we're very specifically going to get to build an online quiz tool, or we want to give students an online quiz. What are the steps we need to do, or they need that happen in the process of us creating an online quiz and the students attempting it? Again, if you write your ideas down, and then maybe we can try and move them into order. I don't know. I'm just sort of watching as people write stuff. I wonder how much more time I should give people. We've got some ideas about, before you even start building the quiz, work out what you're really trying to achieve, which I think is really good. And I've got some notes here, and I missed out that stage, but that's really important. We've got some bits about designing the questions, writing the questions. Got some bits about when the students interact with the quiz. And we've got some comments about the issue of, after the students have given their response, they submit it somehow, and Moodle's going to grade it. And do we give them the grade immediately? Do we do that later? Do we give them the feedback immediately or later? Excellent. So after all the students have attempted the quiz, I'm just seeing an item analysis being added. After all the students have attempted the quiz, it can be very helpful to look at all the data. Because then you will find out if the students know as much as you think they know. Has the quiz worked in the way you hoped it would work? Is it helping you measure which students know more than other students? Based on which questions students do well or do bad at, you might, as a teacher, then have a better idea what you should teach next. Do you need to revise some topic? Can you move ahead faster? I had some answers here. Can I paste them in? Is there space? So you'll see I cheated slightly on my notes. I added step 0 based on what other people said here, because that's a really good idea. And someone else's suggestion made me add sort of step 1A, as well as writing the questions and thinking about the sort of task from the educational point of view. There are the administrative things, like, do you have a time limit? When are the open and closed dates? Are they groups? Do students need to put in a password first? But that was my outline of what the basic steps of running an online quiz are. One I sort of missed out was step 5, as well as do we show the students the feedback immediately or later? If the student got it wrong, do we allow them to try again immediately, rather than just saying you're wrong, tough? I think that's something computers can do that we can't do on paper. If the student's wrong, we tell them they're wrong and say, can you fix it? So those are the steps that we need to go through. And a key sort of determinant of what happens is the questions we write. So I now want to move on to thinking about question types. So if you'd like to move on to slide number 7, I feel that for online quiz software like the Moodle quiz, you can divide questions into 2 basic categories. There are selected response questions where the computer just asks you a question and gives you a very limited set of options. And someone's already starting true-false questions. You see, that's a very limited option. You're given the question. You can only select 2 possible answers. Slightly more general version of that is multiple choice. There's a fundamentally different sort of question, I would argue, that a constructed response. And your essay is a great example of that. We ask students the question and we give them almost no guidance as to what the answer is. They have to find the answer themselves and construct it. I think this is quite an important distinction. Yep, drag and drop is probably selected response. I would actually, in Moodle, if you go into the plugins database, we have a number of different drag and drop question types, one of which is drag and drop words into sentences. But we've got another drag and drop question type in Moodle, which is the one where you put markers on an image. I would argue that identifying a point on an image is a constructed response. You might disagree with me. You might say that an image, well, it's like 100 pixels by 100 pixels. There are only 10,000 possible answers. That's a selective response. I don't think this is a clear-cut one. So someone else has put hotspot into selected response. Matching, good. I was thinking we'd miss that one. Matching is definitely an example of selected response. There's one we don't really have in Moodle, but it's another common question type, is ordering. Yep, calculated is good. Of course, the same thing is numerical is basically the same. Have we now got all the standard Moodle question types on the list? We haven't done badly. We've got a number of the contributed question types, the plugin, the add-ons you can get from the add-ons database. Closed question type's an interesting one because closed question type, some bits of it can be multiple choice, but other bits might be short answer input. So I've actually put that in the middle. And the reason I wanted to raise this distinction is the next slide. So if we move on to slide number 8, both selected response and constructed response questions have strengths and weaknesses. So if we could start putting in that, there's sort of 2x2 grid there. Could we start putting in some things that are either good or bad about each of these questions, sort of broad types of question? Yep. Definitely agree that selected response questions are typically easier to create. Of course, if you start thinking about it at a bit more of a deeper level, if you're not careful creating a multiple choice question, you can just give the answer away. And maybe to create a really good selected response question is harder. Out as a possible thought. Generally, I would say that at least when you're creating a multiple choice question, it's very easy to understand what you're doing, and that is a strength. And so conversely, a problem with constructed response is the students could input almost anything and you have to deal with that. Yeah, hard to anticipate possible answers. And if you talk to people who do good constructed response questions, and the two people I'm thinking of here, if you've come across their work, Chris Sanguin is a maths lecturer at the University of Birmingham, and over the last year I was very lucky to work with Chris rebuilding his stack maths assessment system as a Moodle question type. And the other person I've been lucky enough to work with is Sally Jordan at the Open University, who's been done some good research looking at can computers grade short answer questions, like, you could ask a student, why does the oil float on the water? and you expect the students to type a short sentence in answer to that. Can you accurately grade that sort of student response? And these people would say you can't possibly anticipate all possible student answers. What you have to do is you have to take your best guess when you first create the questions, but then after some students have done it, you have to look at what answers they actually give, and then update your question to based on what you've discovered about what sort of answers students give. I'm rambling on there. We've got some other good things there. Yep, constructed response develops critical mind, better reflection of student knowledge. Selected response requires careful thought on the distractors. Yes, that's probably a good way of putting the thing that they're not actually as easy to create as you think. And low creativity from students' perspective. A way I would put it, I mean, if you have a multiple choice question, then the right answer is there. So, and that might remind you of the answer even if you'd forgotten it. If you're presented with a blank text box, you've got to get the answer out of your memory with no prompting. So I think a weakness of selected response is you might just remind students of the answer even though they'd forgotten it. And another similar weakness with selected response questions is in some areas it's much easier to verify that a given answer is right rather than it is to derive it. Again, you can tell I'm a mathematician, but a classic example in mathematics is it's much harder to integrate something than it is to check that a given expression is the integral. So for some problems, if you're doing multiple choice, students can check, or they can do a sort of process of elimination to find the answer without actually knowing the answer. Another way I thought of it, I think we can say constructed response questions are typically a more authentic assessment. They're more like how you encounter problems in the real world. Someone asks you something and you have no clues as to what the right answer is. I think we found some good thoughts there. So the last two slides were some thinking about question types and how they are or aren't useful. So let's now move on to slide number 9. And now we're going to take a step back again, and having thought a bit about the details of quizzes, I now want to go back to thinking at a higher level about sort of educational strategies. So we've got these online quizzes that Moodle can automatically grade. How can we use them in our courses to achieve educational goals? Pre and post knowledge, that's a good one. Self-assessment, I like it. Practice, yep. Formal assessment, yes. It's nice to think about the trendy stuff that's really student-friendly, but at some point, particularly if we're awarding qualifications, we have to try and measure if students have learnt. Are we confident that we can give this student a certificate with our university or school's name on it saying they know something? Do we know that? Differentiation is a good answer. Students write the questions because that's a worthwhile learning activity. That's definitely, there's an excellent system coming out of New Zealand called Peerwise, which is all about students creating questions for each other and then practicing. If you don't know about Peerwise, I suggest you Google it, and there's good YouTube videos that explain what it's about. Self-reporting. So you're not so much testing the student's knowledge, but you're using it as a way to let students record what they've done. we could discuss whether that's more of a sort of questionnaire or a survey rather than a computer marked assessment, but it can still be done with the quiz. Brainstorming session. Formal assessment, self-assessment. I think you've got everything I thought of and several more. One that I think you've missed. And one thing you can do is you can give students a quiz before they've studied the topic. And you can use the quiz as a way of prompting them to think about the topic and helping them discover what you want them to discover. So rather than sort of telling them stuff and having them learn that way, you just give them a list of questions, and as they go and work out the answers to the questions, they then work out what it is you want to learn. I have a nice example of that I'm just about to put in the chat. You probably don't want to look at this now. But on that site, my colleague Phil Butcher at the Open University made a thing called an interactive tour of the Moodle quiz. It is a Moodle quiz, and it's got a lot of questions about how the Moodle quiz works. It sort of takes you through all the features that you can think, all the things you can do with a Moodle quiz while you're a student attempting a quiz. So that's quite a neat idea. So right. Let's move on to slide number 10. This is a diagram. If you've seen one of my presentations before, you've probably seen this diagram before because I did it once and been recycling it. So we've covered a lot of ideas so far, and this is really how the Moodle quiz works. It's not just one thing. My goal in working on the Moodle quiz has been to make it sort of Lego bricks. So you can build the quiz you want by plugging bits together. We spent a lot of time talking about question types, and there are a range of question types in standard Moodle, and you can get more add-ons. There's this mysterious thing called question behaviors. If you're used to Moodle 1.9, you might know that in Moodle 1.9 there was a choice, adaptive mode, yes or no, and that was 2 possible choices. Since Moodle 2.1, there's been a range of other things. This is really the thing about, do we want students to get the feedback immediately or do they get it later? And if the students get it wrong, do we say, well, that's not right, have another go? Or do we just say, you're wrong, tough luck? And another thing that is one of these question behavior Lego bricks is the idea of certainty-based marking, which is an interesting idea. It's used a lot in medicine education. The idea is that as well as answering the question, you also say how sure you are that you're right. And the idea of that is it encourages students to think about how much they know. How sure are they? Why are they sure? And that also is one of these question behavior Lego bricks, because basically you have the question of the question type, and then at the bottom you have a choice where you can say how sure you are. We have different ways of getting questions in and out of Moodle in different formats. Been some great work done there recently by a French school teacher called Jean-Michel Vedrine. Importing questions from Blackboard had been broken for years, and then last summer Jean-Michel decided it'd be a fun project just to fix it, and he did, and it's brilliant. Great example of just a person from the community contributing to Moodle core code. So there's a whole range of things around just building the questions, and then you put the questions together to make a quiz. I briefly mentioned before the idea of administrative things. There are all these conditions you might need to put on which students can access the quiz and what dates they can access, and do they have to, do we make them type a password before they start the quiz? Do we make them tick a little box saying I'm not going to cheat before they start the quiz? Do we insist they use a particular secure web browser to attempt this quiz? That's something we're working on at the moment at the Open University. We've used quizzes in the teaching part of our course for a very long time. This year we're starting to look at using Moodle to do online exams, and so as part of that we're having to add a restriction that says if you're doing an exam you have to use the secure browser that doesn't let you go to Google. And then reports. Moodle as standard comes with 4 different reports, including statistics, which is something we talked about earlier, using statistics and item analysis to understand if your quiz is working and where your students have gaps in their knowledge. But you can create new quiz reports to display the data in different ways if you think that's helpful. So the point I'm trying to get is that there's all these Lego bricks, which means as a developer you can extend the quiz and the questions in various ways, and that's interesting. And then there are other parts of Moodle that relate to this. Obviously, the quiz generates grades that go into the gradebook, and then you can import grades and export them. And there are other graded activities in Moodle. And using the Learning Tools Interoperability Standard, you can connect other tools into Moodle. So having discussed lots of ideas, that was my sort of summary of where we are. So now let's move on to slide number 11. Having I just tried very briefly to summarize all the things Moodle can do. So now this is really the point. What would you like Moodle to be able to do that we can't do? Put your ideas here. Yep, I agree with that one. It was in Moodle 1.6, so in about 2006 or 2005 even, that it was Gustav Delius from the University of York separated the questions out of the quiz module with the vision that you could then use the same questions in all parts of Moodle, including particularly the lesson. And that was, what, 6 or 7 years ago, and no one's got around to updating the lesson to use the questions from the question bank. And over the years, as I've worked on the question system, I've been thinking about things to do to make it easier to use questions in the lesson, say, or in other activities. And Moodle 2.1, so about 2 or 3 years ago, it got a lot easier. Right, that's another good thing. We have this question bank in Moodle. You can store your questions in there. You can sort them by categories. And you can even share them between courses, so that's really quite complicated to set up. There's a problem there. But when you start sharing questions between courses, if another teacher edits the question, do you want the question to change in your quiz, or do you want to go on using the original version that you understood and saw? There's definitely problems in the question bank that we need to sort out. Yep, so I'm going to move that new idea because that's very closely related. So related to the idea of if one teacher edits a question, should that affect all teachers? There's part of that is if someone edits a question, should we track the history of the question, how it was edited, a bit like a wiki? And I think to really make sharing questions work, we have to do that. We have to get versioning to work. And the bit I don't understand is how we can do that without making everything so complicated that most people don't understand it. So we want things to be simple and intuitive to use, but we want all this history information kept behind the scenes. Tagging questions is a thing ages ago. I think it was in Moodle 2.0. I made it so you can add a tag to any question, and you can do absolutely nothing with those tags. Bit of an anomaly. We need uses for tags on questions. That's definitely something we need. Tracking a question's performance when it's shared between quizzes across all the places. Yep. More graphics. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So more graphical information in the quiz reports to make it really immediately obvious what's going on would be good. Actually, jumping ahead to what I was going to put on my next slide, but in the idea of with charts to help understand quizzes. This is Sally Jordan, who I mentioned before. She's done some good work comparing the quizzes on 2 very similar courses and found that they work very differently for students. So that's her blog. She writes really interesting things about how e-assessment really works in practice for Open University students. So we've got some things coming up in the chat. Yeah. I definitely agree that the quiz is, I'm quite pleased with the quiz in that it's a really powerful tool if you know what you're doing. But for a new user, it is really daunting. You need to do something about that. In fact, I don't know if you've used Moodle 2.5 yet, but we have done some things. We've taken the first steps on making the quiz easier to use, making the forms a bit less scary, and making so that was mostly done by my colleague Colin Chambers at the Open University. He's done some great work there. I'm really happy with it, but we need to do more. Drag and drop questions. If you look in the Moodle add-ons database, there are some drag and drop questions that the Open University has made and shared with the world. You can install them. They work quite nicely, except they don't work 100% reliably on mobile devices. Should we add the drag and drop questions to the standard Moodle download? I'm tempted to do that, but I think they should work on mobile devices first. Ability to associate learning outcomes with questions. If you were at Martin Degamas's keynote, I'm going to say this morning, but it's perhaps better to say what 6-7 hours ago. He said that in Moodle, hopefully in Moodle 2.6, there'll be a whole lot of work on learning outcomes that Moodle Rooms is doing, and one of the things they are doing is letting you associate learning outcomes with questions, and then getting learning outcomes for the whole quiz computed automatically. Automatic deductions for late attempts. That's actually, there's certainly a bug in the Moodle tracker asking for that. Been there for a long time. As a feature request, we haven't done it yet. What do you mean by cut-off dates like in assignment? I don't know which, I'm not that familiar with the assignment module, so I can't work out immediately which bit of assignment you're talking about there. Oh yes, sorting in the question bank mostly works, but you can't sort by how old the date the question was created, and that annoys a lot of people, quite rightly. And we haven't found a good way to add that yet. That is also on the list of things we really ought to fix. I see you're asking for a sort of soft deadline on the quiz. So there's a due date, but if students miss that, they can still submit their answers, and we might grade them or we might not. That is, interestingly, at the Open University, we've for sort of essay assignments. For assignment, you know, we don't use the Moodle assignment module. And that's all, we've always had extensions there. And amazingly, we've never needed to add that to the Moodle quiz. I'm quite surprised I haven't been told we must implement this for online quizzes, but we've managed to hold the line that online quizzes at the OU must be submitted by the deadline, or that's it. I think that might be because online quizzes are typically a small percentage of the total course grade. The grace period that was added in, I guess, Moodle 2.3 doesn't quite handle that, because once time has expired, although you can submit and finish, you can't answer any more questions. So you can't really do the quiz late. You just get a chance to hand it in if you forgot to hand it in. One thing that Moodle does, there's another, looking in the text chat as well as on the screen, Anna's talked about audio and video in feedback and multiple choice options. In the quiz, anywhere you can put text, you can put audio or video or images. Particularly since Moodle 2, that's worked really well. In Moodle now, anywhere you can put type text with the HTML editor, you can also have files associated with it, like images and multimedia, and that's great. There was one that was written on here. Yes. So that's another reason why it'd be really good to update the lesson module to use the question bank. Webcam or other verifiability for testing. There's a question there. I said that the Open University had been considering a pilot, where we've been doing pilots of online exams. And a few months ago, I did a pilot with an online American webcam proctoring service, pretending to be a student, pretending to cheat. And they had a system for doing all the webcam stuff that was separate from Moodle. So you sort of went into their system and signed in and waved your webcam around the room to make sure you hadn't stuck a poster on the wall with all the answers. But then you went to our Moodle site and answered the quiz. So Moodle didn't need any features to make that work. The interesting thing about that pilot was at least one of the other participants managed to look up the answer to a question on their iPhone without being caught. And another person had plugged 2 keyboards into their computer. So they sat in front of the webcam pretending to type, while in the other room their wife was on the other keyboard and monitor answering the questions with reference books. So not a perfect pilot, but actually not bad. There are situations where it might be as good as anything else. And like all these things, when you start worrying about things that might go wrong in an online test, you then start also thinking, well, could the same thing happen in a paper test? Would we really catch it? One thing that was written on this slide a very long time ago, someone said it should be more friendly for young students. And that sounds like, being more friendly sounds like a good thing. Can you be more specific about how specific, what's unfriendly at the moment? What do they struggle with? Yeah, drag and drop would make things more friendly. And as I say, if you go to the add-ons database, you can have it. I don't know if everyone can see the text chat, but Anna's suggesting some more fun question types. So you're thinking about you're thinking about making it more friendly for young students by having more fun question types. I was wondering if are there also things, is the navigation system too complicated for young students? Or is it simple enough that you just click next till you get to the end and then you click submit? There are a couple of things that, based on having read the quiz forum for a very long time, I was expecting people to bring up in this session. So let me put a couple of things I was expecting to come up. So one thing is, we've got the essay question in Moodle that lets you capture. Your student can put in text. But these days, well, as we can see in Big Blue Button, you can do video online really quite easily. You can do audio. So should we have question types in Moodle that let students record a bit of audio? Perhaps that would be rather good for language teaching. Record a bit of video to be submitted and manually graded. Actually, if you're thinking about recording audio, I don't know if you've heard of the Google Summer of Code project. Which is something Google funds every year. It basically pays students to do a summer job which is working on an open source project. This year, someone called James Salzman contacted me out of the blue saying he worked on artificial intelligence software that could use speech recognition to work out if you were pronouncing a word correctly. And therefore, should we try and make this into a Moodle question type? So obviously, you have to, you set up the question with, tell the students to say this sentence, and they speak it to their computer, which records them, and the computer can then analyze that and work out if they have pronounced it correctly. And apparently computers can do this. And, well, we'll have to see if this Summer of Code project works out and we actually build such a thing. So I think, and I mean, there are other exciting question types for Moodle now. I mentioned briefly before Stack, which is for grading mathematics. I don't have an example. Perhaps I should have had an example of a screen grab. But the student, you ask, this is used in university or high school level maths. You can ask students a calculus or algebra problem. The student, it's definitely constructed response. The student types in an equation as their response, and the computers can do maths. We can process the equation and tell them if they got it right or not. That's the Stack question type. If you're a maths teacher, I strongly recommend you look at that. And I mentioned Sally Jordan and her work on grading sentence length answers automatically. That's now led to the pattern match question type, PMatch, from the Open University. That's in the Moodle add-ons database as well. If you can learn the syntax, then you can automatically grade sentences. Quite cool. Quite difficult to set up, but very cool if you can do it. Which I think leads us back to this issue about question banks. If we're going to have really advanced questions that are really difficult to author, then there's a lot of potential for letting teachers collaborate to build question banks. That's kind of following the open source model. If you're at Mike Churchwood's opening keynote, he was talking about all the different types of open, including open educational resources. And I think questions are potentially very good open educational resources. They're things we can share. Yeah, so.
Sorry to interrupt, Tim, but we're going to have to start wrapping up now.
We are nearly at the end. There's not much more I want to say. One other minor thing that I was expecting someone to raise. At the moment in the quiz, you get a single score out the other end. Something people want and ask for from time to time in the quiz forum is they want a quiz that generates multiple different scores. So like maybe you have one quiz and you get one grade for spelling and one grade for grammar and one grade for subject knowledge, all from a single quiz. And we can't do that yet, but that's something that people have wanted for a very long time, and I'm sure we'll do that someday. So as the nagging moderator just reminded us, we need to wrap up now. So let's just quickly move to the final slide. There's a lot of good stuff online about online assessment, and I was just wondering, does anyone have any links or sources of information where they read cool stuff about online assessment? Those were my links. Maybe I'll put them in the text chat as well, because then they're clickable. So if anyone else has links where they think you can learn interesting stuff about online assessment, then please add them to that final slide. And quickly, if anyone has any other questions they'd like to ask me, feel free to unmute your microphone or type in the text chat, and I'll try and answer.
Tim, I'm hoping we'll have the Google Doc added to the course page as well, so that people can access it from there.
Yes, absolutely. I was planning to save this document and share it, because I think I want to say thank you very much to everyone who's contributed. This was something of an experiment. Didn't know how it was going to work out, and thanks to your contributions, I'm quite pleased with the way it's gone. I think you enjoyed it too.
Fantastic, thanks. All right, well, we might leave the chat open a bit because we haven't got another presentation yet. I think we've got a coffee break coming up next. But thank you very much, Tim. I'm actually quite interested in how you did this one for if you weren't sure how it was going to go, but it's good to know you guys are looking for feedback all the time to keep improving Moodle. That's really good to see. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, it's very rewarding. You know, it's not a chore contributing to Moodle. You do stuff, and people take the ideas and run with it, and come back with more ideas of things to do. So it's a really rewarding thing to be doing, and I really enjoy it. And in terms of how this presentation was done, it wasn't a completely made up thing. A couple of years ago, I think Thomas Lazick did a presentation a bit like this with lots of audience participation. So I had seen someone else do it. So that made me sort of feel I could give it a go and see how it worked.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Like I said, we've got a coffee break coming up, so I hope to see you in the coffee lounge. Otherwise, we'll talk to you all next time. And thank you again, Tim.
Thank you for putting on the iMoot. It's a great thing.